Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
I'm Brian Buffini, and my podcast, It's a Good Life, is all about helping entrepreneurs. Here's the thing. A recession is a terrible thing to waste. Over the next few episodes of the podcast, we'll touch on past recessions, why this one will be different, and how to be a recession buster. It's a Good Life, the podcast for entrepreneurs.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.
I'm Matt Gilhooly, and this is The Life Shift, candid conversations about the pivotal moments that changed lives forever. My friends, I am here with David for the Life Shift podcast. And as you know, David, we talk about these pivotal moments that have changed people's lives forever. And you have like 6 or 7 different moments in your life that really changed your life, and probably in good ways. And you might look back and be thankful for some of them, maybe not all of them, right?
I'm thankful for all of them, I think.
Okay, good. Well, before we do that, I just like to set the stage for people and say how we know each other, which we went to high school together, but I'm not sure that we ever did anything together.
I don't think so. Yeah, I think you're right.
We had mutual friends.
Mutual friends. Knew. Oh yeah, no, Matt, but like, yeah. And later in life, like social media, it's like, oh yeah, Matt, and like, oh, look at all these, oh yeah, okay, cool, yeah, get into adulthood and
yeah. You know what? I've been talking to people, and we've talked a lot about how social media has, if used correctly, has been a blessing for so many of us that didn't grow up with the internet really, or social media part of the internet. We had our Microsoft Encarta, for our encyclopedia.
Bringing it back.
But it was, it's been good because I feel like I know what so many people from our high school are doing now. And it's allowed me to either passively pay attention or every once in a while actively engage with these people like we do every once in a while, but I still know what's going on in your life on social media.
Yeah, it's cool. Like, I think I've reconnected with a number of people, just from, the internet. We had the reunions, and it just kind of things, people came back up, and it's like, oh yeah, like we lived together for years, and like, we grew up together, and we should like connect. Like, we kind of did our stuff as adults, and now we're like, hey, let's like go back to, seems like now the time, like around the 20th anniversary, like you're kind of reconnecting with people from the past, because especially COVID, you're like, I want to find the people that I actually really liked, so yeah, it can be really good for sure. Connecting people. I mean, there's so much good about the social media and the internet, but
2 years ago at the beginning of the pandemic, I organized my graduating class little reunion on Zoom, just because we were all kind of locked up, and you joined us for that. And I think we stayed on the Zoom call for close to 3.5-4 hours, connecting. And it was funny because most of the conversations were very much around the social media. Like, I see that you've done this, or you have 3 kids, their names are, it was just very interesting, but it's been a blessing in a way if used correctly. So that's kind of how we stay connected.
Yeah.
And I get to see all the things that you're doing and pursuing your dreams and making things happen. So before we start talking about kind of anything that shifted your life drastically, maybe you can set the stage of, what you were doing before that first kind of pivotal moment.
Yeah, the first one. Okay, yeah. So I was, I went to University of Central Florida, of course, go Knights. I graduated, I had a job, lost a job like everybody, and moved back home. Then I was like, went back to school. I'm going to pursue medicine. And so that didn't work out. And I was worked in home building because it was hot, and then watched the market crash in front of me. Then worked at a home builder, as a financial analyst. And that's kind of where I was when the first major thing. So I was working as I was originally a marketing analyst. I went to school, got a business degree, marketing major, did some marketing stuff, and then wound up being a financial analyst for HD Supply, which is a large multinational supply, well, mostly in the US, but yeah, there's a supply company for industrial supply. And so I was working there, just kind of doing the 9 to 5, not really liking life, not liking work, not feeling inspired, feeling like there's something else out there, and like not knowing what I want to do. There's kind of the corporate grind that just gets on people. And for someone like me,
so every 20 something year old's life is you graduate and then you have to work, and you're probably not doing what you thought you were going to do.
Yeah. And then this wound up being, in my 30s. So, like this is kind of moving up towards like the 30, around 30, I was working there. And cause I started there in like 2007-ish, I think. So I was 27 and I went through until about 32 is when I wound up the first pivotal shift maybe. but yeah, so that's kind of where it was just kind of the adult life working. And there's so many times you're just like, I'm just doing the job to do the job. And
right.
For me, like I've always been connected to like doing good and being around people and just like feeling that things are being valuable and affecting people. Like my whole family is nurses, a few doctors, and a few teachers. So it's like everyone that's giving and helping. And so I feel like I've had that the whole time. Like I was a team captain in school, and like there's just always giving and always like putting people first, and what I was doing was not anywhere in that frame. And no one ever said like, hey, you should do, follow your heart. Like at school, I don't know if you remember, I was the sports editor of the newspaper. I was also the assistant editor in chief for a year. And I was in journalism all 4 years, loved it, won 2 awards. And my journalism teacher, he's like, don't go into journalism. There is no money in it. Right. And that's like our generation was like, go to college or you're a piece of crap. You'll never make anything. And everything needs to be about you making money. And nobody, like, I remember guidance counselors, no one said like, what do you really love to do? Like nobody, I feel like there was no guidance in the guidance of the guidance counselors.
Well, it was guidance to get to college, to then get your job, to then get promoted.
Right. Exactly. And it wasn't like, hey, what do you feel like you would be really good at and what you like thrive at? And I just think there's like that missing link of understanding. It was like, oh, you have to fit into the social bubble of what we've created and go be a good, cog in the social economy, in the economy. Like you go do your job, do your thing. And that's just the way everyone was raised. And so, yeah, that happened to me. It was like, I never thought about pursuing things that really made me feel good. It was like, oh, I have to do what my teachers say and what my parents are saying. And
what society was telling you to do.
Society, yeah. Ultimately, that is what society talking, right? And so that's kind of where that was. And it's like, man, I don't feel like this is me. I don't feel good about doing this work. And then I would do charity work. I would do something. And I was an event chair for Relay for Life multiple times. So like I I helped coordinate raising like probably almost $1 million for American Cancer Society through Relay for Life's, UCF for 4 years, like downtown Orlando, like just, I like loved doing that stuff because I felt like involved. I actually worked at Publix in the deli, one of my favorite jobs ever. That's during one of the shifts, but I worked in deli, like slinging sandwiches, and I loved it because I got to talk to people and I got to make some people smile. I was connecting with people, and so that was kind of wasn't taught to like figure like what makes you feel good. Just go get a job, and then we all kind of get to that point where I think COVID has shown us that everybody was like, we all collectively hate our jobs because we're just doing it because someone said we should do it. And we've never really given thought of like what was really going to make us happy because we're trying to satisfy some social stigma or the expectation of what you should do to be successful, especially as a man. Like you have to be successful. If you don't, then you're a failure. Like that's part of one of the shifts too, we can get to. But yeah, so I think when you start to see that and you're like, oh, but that's where I was feeling that like, God, I just don't want to do this. I don't know what it is. I call it, it was crushing my soul. Like I felt like I had no life. I look back at me then and now I'm like completely different person.
To your point about the successful piece, wouldn't it have been nice in high school that if success was defined for us a little bit differently and not monetarily or status or any of those kind of pieces, but rather finding what brings you joy. And if you can make that a career, then maybe you should try to do that. But I also think that the 90s and early 2000s were a lot different in the world. There were fewer. I mean, now people can create, the gig economy is very individual. You can do it at home.
Right. You needed to have a storefront. You had to have a location to have a business, essentially. That there was no internet. I mean, there was, but it wasn't, it was like logging on 56K to, wait for AOL Messenger to launch, like it was not a commerce engine, like we have now. So agreed. But I think the principle is like, find the thing that, so like one of my friends is an artist, and there was no other, he was never going to do anything else. Brilliant artist, went to Ringling Art School, was never going to do anything else in his life. There's no way that he was going to go get some like 9-to-5 job. Never, but that's because that was just that's the way he was wired. And it's just like, nope. And he had that internal drive because he was so artistic. But I think, everybody can have that, but it doesn't necessarily need to be like you're on the far scale of being like a super artist, where you're like in that. You don't need to be that far down there to just pursue something that would make you happy. Like, oh, I really like working with kids, so I'm going to go do this now, and just finding the thing that is not based on like, oh, well, like I just hear so many people like, oh, I have to make, well, that's six figure. It's like the marker of success. Like, oh, it's a 6-figure job. And it's like, are you working 70 hours a week? That doesn't sound like 6 figures to me. It sounds like 50,000 to me because you're working twice as much. But yeah.
Yeah. And I think too, back then too, if you were a musician or something along those lines, there were a lot fewer opportunities because we didn't have the internet as it is now. So you really had to be signed by a label. You had to have, I was talking to my friend Alex yesterday, who is a musician, and talking about that time period in which you really did need a label behind you. You could get a multi-million-dollar contract, and then you compare it to now, nobody's really getting those multi-million-dollar contracts. People aren't really releasing full albums unless you are like on a major label. It's mostly a single culture. Yeah, so EPs, things have changed.
Yep. Oh yeah. Yeah. One of my friends is a producer, and he works with like Young Thug here. And like, he was our neighbor, and he was just like, you would hear him beats all the time. And he was just like, just dropping singles all the time, and you have TikTok now. Like one of my friends, she knows like Ty Verds, like one of his friends from high school. And he just blew up on TikTok, and now he's like a music star. It's just like the opportunities are endless now. So yeah, I think this is the shift that's happening in our society, where we're realizing that we have a lot more power to control our lives, and we don't have to fit into the cog that all the people at the top of the system have created. And, people being little worker bees is good for the companies. It's not good for people.
So at that point you were kind of burnt out just doing the 9-to-5, what was required of you, what you were told to do. And then something major happened. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, I got fired 3 days after returning from my honeymoon. It set things in motion where I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life anymore, because I felt like a failure. It's like I, lost my job, just got married, and, there was a political ordeal, good old boy supply company, internal departments vying for the same business from other things. I made a mistake. They made an example of me, put me on this thing, all stupid stuff that never needed to happen. And then, got railroaded, because that's what they do in corporate America. Someone has to be blamed, and, one mistake, or, it's just really, even went through like a performance improvement plan and passed it. And then all of a sudden I come back from my wedding and get fired. So that's not a really good way to start your marriage. And it could be if, oh, you found another job and better job and great, but that didn't happen. I worked in, that was in 2012, and I'd worked through the recession in a job, and didn't, now the market was completely different now. Like you had to do so many different things for the same role that I was never doing, because everything constricted and everyone was doing, a level up. Like somebody wanted me to do a SOX audit, which is an accounting audit, and, it's for SOX compliance, and it's SEC, it's all this stuff, right? And it was like, that's what my director did. And I was an analyst. Like, what do you mean? Like, so I couldn't get a job afterwards. And I was looking for all these corporate jobs, And I had lots of final interviews and stuff like that, but nothing would work. So I wound up going to, I was trying to find my way. I went to my friend's window film company and was like selling window film for commission. It was like, I just wanted to make something happen on my own. And I was tired of like the company culture. I just didn't feel like it fit me. It felt like it's not honest. It's not truthful. Like I worked for KB Home, and the VP of sales, she got mad at me when I would tell her like that the market was exploding and like we needed to lower prices because this is happening and that happening. She's like, no. It's like she never wanted to hear bad news because their sales, they would just want to keep making money. I just never felt like no one was being honest in a lot of things. It was all about how can we make money, and there wasn't as much integrity as I felt there should have been in a lot of that stuff. And I think that's just sometimes that happens in corporate America because it is all about the dollar, and that leads you to do different things a lot of times. Maybe not the right thing all the time. So regardless, I just wanted to do something different. And so I'm doing that and not making money. And there's like pressures to do stuff. And, from, the wife at home, like, the pressure of, well, life isn't the way that we're supposed to do it. And like, you need to get a job and you need to do this. But I want to do something different. I don't even know what I want to do. So there's a lot of stress and pressure around trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do with my life now, because what I've spent time going to college and doing that, it just kind of blew up and now I can't even get a job. And it's like, I just don't want to do this anymore. So I was trying to do different things and, a smattering of different things. And it came down to like, I wasn't making much selling window film, and it was all commission. And it's like, you have to get a job. So I go and work at a a headlight, like car headlight conversion, like little shop, making like, I don't know, $10 an hour or something like that. And 3 weeks in, my ex was the event chair for a relay. And so I was involved and went to it. And this is where the second shift happened. I wound up, we're playing football in the middle of the night, and I ran into a generator and almost cut my leg off.
Oh, God.
That was, it was a steel trailer. And so I ran into essentially a steel beam, and it just below my knee, and it, like an axe, just almost cut my leg off. Wow. And so that was not good. There was, greater than 50% chance I'd lose my leg that night. And then they were like, okay, now you might still lose it. You have 2 weeks to get through, not having an infection, because it was, gaping. You could see the entire inside of my leg, everything, all the bones, like it was not good. So they're like, okay, passed, you're good. And they're like, okay, you'll be lucky to walk without a cane. This is what your prognosis is in life. And so I took that as a challenge. So that's the shift number 2, and I'll kind of backtrack. There's other things I was kind of looking into doing while this was happening. And so then, I'm there, I don't have a job. I'm not making any money. I'm like lucky to have my leg, sleeping on the couch for 2.5 months because I couldn't lay flat. Like, all this stuff, huge, massive. I had PTSD. Like, there was a lot of stuff going on.
Right.
I was like, what am I going to do with my life? Like, I don't feel inspired. I don't feel like I'm doing what I want to do. And so I was like, I think I'm going to go back to do something in medicine. And I was like, I had this whole thing, like we hadn't talked, but I'm a voice actor now, an actor. And I was like, a friend had put that bug in my ear back when I worked at the supply company. And she's like, she worked in advertising, and she's like, you always do these funny things. I would always like call her and do like impressions and stuff and do funny stuff. And she's like, you really should be a voice actor. Like you totally could do this. You're so talented. I was like, oh yeah, sure. I'll just do that. Who knows how to do that? So, but she set the bug, and, through the process, before I got hurt, like my ex got me this book that I wanted. I went to Star Wars weekends one year, and James Arnold Taylor, who's the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi and anything that's not Ewan McGregor and everything else, everyone watching this has heard him so many times you just don't know it, but he's like one of the elite voice actors ever. And he was at Star Wars weekends, has a whole show. He does like 100 impressions and they just roll into each other. And it was like, that set it off. Right. I was like, okay, that's what I want to do. He recommended a book. The ex got me that book. And so that book was there and I'd read it. And so there was that thing of me wanting to do something. And so when I got hurt and I'm like, oh, I'm going to go do radiography because it's medicine and it's a little bit chill and it's not as like crazy as being a nurse or a doctor. And it was like, why am I looking at those things? Like, I have this book, I have all these things. I want to do voice acting, and here's this opportunity. And so I said, okay, screw it. I'm going to go do it. And, you know, it's like thinking, what am I going to do with my life? Like, am I going to be able to walk again? Am I going to be able to like run with my kids if I ever have them? Am I going to, you know, when something like that happens, like life changes, you know, because my perspective on life, I was staring down, like I might not ever be able to walk normally again. And I was an athlete. My identity could be crushed because I can't go and play softball or go play basketball with people, you know. Now I'm a totally different type of person because I'd have a physical ailment. And so I was scary. But being the type of person I am, extremely, like I take challenges head on. And I think comes from sports a lot and, you know, just personality. But it was always, you know, they told me like, oh, you probably won't walk without a cane. I was like, game on. I was like, you want to bet?
Right.
And, you know, now there's no reason why I've recovered the way I have. Like, you know, just shouldn't have been possible. But, you know, that's all determination. But that kind of set that shift. And it's like, I'm sitting there, what am I going to do in life?
And you had a lot of time, probably.
Oh, yeah. I was just sitting, taking drugs, you know, opiates, like candy, you know, and I'm sitting there thinking like, what do I want to do? And it was like, I'm going to go do this radiography. And I'm looking into programs like, if I'm going to spend money, why don't I pursue the thing that is worthy of pursuing? Not that radiography wouldn't be, but like, I want to do this thing. There's no better time. Like there's no other time. And so I found a coach and I started doing coaching while I was, you know, still on crutches, had to put my leg up on a thing. Like I was doing coaching on, you know, Zoom or, you know, Google Hangouts or whatever it was at the time. And that's what kind of started that journey. So that shift of having a massive life-changing injury that, you know, was extremely traumatic, it changed the whole way I thought about life and what I wanted to do. No, I think that's really where things changed, because then I was like, yeah, all this other stuff doesn't mean crap, because like, you know, yeah, could have lost my leg. Right. And could have lost my leg that night and life would have been,
or worse.
Yeah. I mean, could have hit it, could have cut, if my leg was on the ground, luckily my leg was in the air. Like I was running and that leg was in the air, but if it was on the ground, I probably would have lost my leg, because it would have dislocated. It would have torn everything apart, and it could have torn the artery. Like I could have lost my leg. Absolutely. If my leg was on the ground, like the head orthopedic surgeon was like, this is like the worst injury he's ever seen. He's like, people, they get head on collisions and their knees hit the dashboard, they explode like mine did. And he's like, you know, so it's a very rare thing. And so, you know, that's how impactful it was for my life. And I'm just like, you know, I want to do the thing I want to do. I want to pursue the thing that I feel worthy of pursuing, instead of just finding something to make money, which was what was wanted at the time, you know, in my marriage and stuff like that. And it's what we thought we needed. Like, oh, we should have the money and the job. But it just wasn't something that was there for me. And so I started down that path. And that was like, you know, the massive, you know, shift, getting that ball rolling and getting into the industry and coaching and learning and just staying with it. Without that happening, I don't know that it would work.
Right. I think a lot of people say that they're a product of the circumstances and the experiences that they have had up to that particular point. Mm-hmm. And so I would imagine that stopped you in your tracks, like literally, and made you reevaluate what the heck you were doing. And I would imagine it's close to people that have these near-death experiences in which they're like, wait, I'm still living, so I need to do something with my life that brings purpose and meaning beyond just the volunteer things that you were doing and such. Yeah. So I commend you for taking the thing that was back here all along, telling you what to do, to like jump head first. Yeah, were you able to make success out of that?
I mean,
at first?
No, absolutely not.
What did you learn from that?
Oh, I mean, so much. I mean, there's a lot of things. I mean, in acting and stuff a lot of stuff that you're doing on your own, you gotta do it and just do it until it works, and not have the expectation. I think this is where it is. When you go into something different that doesn't align with like the societal norms, we bring the societal norms to this new thing. So voice acting is not being an analyst, you know? But I'm like, oh, it's 8:30 and I'm not at work. And, you know, it's like, but that's not what actors do. You know, it's like, and I still judge myself for not being a good corporate worker in the things that I do, because that's so ingrained in like hustle, especially East Coast hustle, and like doing the things and like always got to be working. And if there's 5 minutes, you could be productive. And, you know, there's that kind of constraint of that has moved forward. And so you first started and you're like, oh, I'm just going to do this. And I got, for me, I got a coach, and now I know, wasn't the greatest training in the world. And, basically just trained me 2 demos with scripts. And so I got those, and I wound up getting an agent that, he connected me with. And then I started auditioning, and then I sucked because I didn't learn how to act. I learned how to do these scripts well enough to then be produced on a demo. And like, if I worked with you for a few weeks, that could happen too, because you would just do the same thing over, and you would just be mimicking that thing instead of really learning how to do it. It's kind of like, hey, here's the answer to the problem. And then you get the answer the first time, but you have no idea how to do the math to get there ever. And it's just like, well, I have the answer key. And so.
Right. I wonder if your background as an analyst moving into a subjective type field made you kind of like think, okay, this is the structure, this is how I do it, this is the formula, and then I produce a result, and then that should be good.
Yes, but you know what? It's not me. It's every single person, almost every person. Now I'm a coach in voiceover. I run a voiceover school called Global Voice Acting Academy, and I help people get in the business all the time. And I speak on a lot of things. I'm kind of an influencer in the industry, and well known as I talk about rates, and I talk about a lot of stuff, mindset, and things that I think are important, because we are so challenged with that. Especially, like you said, we're moving from one thing that we've done like all these years, and now we're moving into some creative field, and the majority of the average age of voice actors is like over 30, because it's so many people's second, third, fourth, fifth thing that they're doing in life, and now they're like, screw this, I want to do something I want, and it's like their side thing, and they're trying to make it happen. And so for me, it was like, I got those things with like, hey, I'm here. I got an agent. Oh my God. Like, I thought that's it.
Right.
I made it. I'm a voice actor. And then I sucked, and I couldn't book anything. And so, and this is what happens because you're training, and you just don't know how hard it is to be that good to book, especially jobs that are coming from agents, and, not your own, not just some small, like, internal video that they don't really care. But you find out, hey, this is really, really difficult. And then maybe you do it once and you book, and you're like, yeah, now what? Now you got to do it again. And so that, like, you can find like success, I guess it would be, what is success? And for me, it was booking and making money, because at that time I didn't have really any income. I started working, once, I got well enough, I started working at Publix about 6 months after my injury in the deli. I would just do that because my wife's like, you have to do something. And I'm like, okay. Like, I was doing other things, like, we just need money. And it was, and there is, like, obviously you need money, and there's that balance of like how you do that and all those things. But I was like, okay, got a job at Publix. I slipped a few times. I got like really worried about my knee. It was just like all this stuff, and I started that's when I was doing coaching. I started, I'd been doing the coaching already, and I was like auditioning and stuff like that at that time. And I was Ubering. And then, so I was working at Publix. I worked like 35 hours a week, and that's the hardest I've ever worked. I'll be damn honest. I had 12-hour shift, half-hour break, on your feet all day. Like, so I was working hard, then I'd go Uber, and then I'd do VO whenever I could. And I was just trying to do all that stuff, but for me, the success was like, I need to make money, because that's what the thing on me was making money. And that didn't come. I didn't book, it probably took me over a year to book my first job. And that was from Craigslist. So it taught me a lot of just continuing to do it.
Yeah. And I don't think that you're alone. I think people that are in a creative industry that is so subjective, they find ways, if they can, to support, like, you know, pay the bills so that they can pursue what they're doing. So it sounds like you did that, which is a commendable thing.
Yeah.
The question is, or how do you talk to your current students about not booking those things, and to, when you don't get it, how do you continue on? Like what pushed you in particular to continue pursuing?
I just don't want to give up, because I know I have talent, you know, I know it's there, and also I've put so much work into it, and money and effort. And it's like, it's a hard thing. And I think it's also like such a really cool thing, you know, like when you're starting out, you're like, man, if I could just be in a video game, if I could just do this, like, how cool is this? Like there's an aura of like, that's really cool to do that, you know, and you feel, you know, and it's rewarding, because you're like, there's not many people that do this and then get paid to do it, and then get paid on a regular basis, and then are like really good at it. And so I guess the drive of completing the task that I wanted to do, because if I was like, okay, I'm not successful, I'm not making money right now, well, then did I really want to do it? Because if I went back to school to go to med school, I didn't do that because I was like, oh, I can make a few $100,000 as a doctor. I did it because I want to help people. If you're a voice actor, like, oh, I'm not making any money, then you're doing that for the money and not doing it for the craft or the love of it or the want to do that as your career. So I really just wanted to make it happen. And I realized, you know, there's an opportunity. You can make a lot of money as a voice actor and an actor. And it's not to say like, oh, that's what you're chasing, but there is, like, your life can change in a week. You know, like I booked my biggest job last week, essentially. And
congrats.
Thanks. I mean, it's just the money aspect. And it's just the client I've been working with on internal jobs. And now they wanted these videos that I'm going to do to go into broadcast. And I gave them the rate, and they're like, okay. And it's a rate that like I created, because we can get into that too. But, and it's like, oh, look at that. The power of just knowing your business and putting it out there. And they're like, they're like, okay. And, you know, it's not a lot of money, but it's over $10,000, you know, and those don't come around that often. But then they start to, and like, so my friends are like, that happens every month or every couple of weeks. They're booking like these big things, and the snowball just rolls downhill. And all of a sudden you know, then they're like, oh, we have to renew that. And you don't do a thing, and you get 10% more. And so they're like, oh, great, they renewed it. Now I get more money. Or if you're in the union, you just get residuals, and like, wow, I just got a $2,000 check. Wow, they must have run this again or something, you know? So the ability to have a great life financially is there if you stick it out and you're good and you do the right things. And it's very difficult for that to happen. And that challenge, I think, is like, I want to be one of those people. And some of it may be like, I want people to see me as being good, you know, a little ego. That there could be some of that, and I'm not going to lie. It's cool to like be known, or to, you know, be like, oh, like the people that are actors, like, you know, there's a coolness to it. But for me, it's more about the work and being able to do that, to be like, hey, trading.com booked me to be the voice for them, you know, like, it's like, wow, I'm good. And so like, that's your validation, I think, you know. And so that's what, you know, you get those wins, and then people tell like, just stick it out. You're good, you're talented, you'll find your way. And that's kind of part of it. Like, that's what I tell everybody, is that everyone's journey is different. And that's in life and in voiceover. Everyone's journey is different. We've all had our different roads. We've all had our speed bumps. We've all had our stop signs, red lights, you know, we've all had everything, and it's all different. We live different lives, but our journeys, we live together, but all of our journeys are different. And in voiceover, it's who you are. It's not a voice. Like, so many people are like, oh, do a voice. And that's not what we do. We act. And to get to that point, I tell them, you know, it's about you, your journey. VO is about your voice and who your perspective and your opinions on things. And that's what makes it unique. It's not just doing a good voice, you know, like, that's gone. It hasn't been that for years. So it's intrinsically about who you are and your journey. Like, your life experiences help develop your perspective of things. It's about you. It's not a standard like, oh, I have to get a 90 to get an A, and once I get to that, then I'm there. It's not that. It's so subjective, right? So if it's your journey may be different than other people's. And I know people that I just talked to a girl who started in November. She's booked more jobs than I have in 2 years. My thing is like, no, sink into the craft and know that what you're doing is good, work at it, and just be patient, and your time will come. And that's happening now. People now, before there wasn't diversity, casting was so different years ago. And so now there's a lot more people that their time is in the sun because now there's more things being created for them. So it kind of goes along, like your voice is going to come in life, like you're going to have different things that happen, but it's like the road, and that you're doing the work and not that you got to the destination, because the destination could change. Maybe you want to take a pit stop. Like a lot of times we look for the end result instead of just being present and doing the work today and what we're doing right now. Because tomorrow I could get hit by a car and die. And, so that's kind of what I say, like, enjoy what you're doing for today. Don't worry about the end result because you don't know what that's going to be.
Do you think that you are more driven to pursue the coaching part of voiceovers, but also your own thing based on how much you hated working like that corporate 9 to 5, felt just stuck in the circular motion? Do you think that you are better now because you did that?
Oh, yeah, 1000% for sure. I mean, it showed me what I didn't want, and what I knew felt icky and gross and not inspiring, and not, now I feel like I'm inspired because I get to inspire people all the time, either through, I do
Right.
fitness stuff and, health stuff in social media a lot. Or did, that's a whole ball of wax. Like sometimes I'm gone for weeks and months, but yeah, like helping people, inspire them to chase their dreams. And because it's hard, right? It's so hard to chase a dream like that. Because it's not the norm. It's not what we've taught in society. So being like that, kind of like a guide light for people to realize their vision, realize their dreams, and not be held back by, oh, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that, like kind of old world thinking that we've all been programmed with, and then moving into something that is completely artistic and just different than most people are doing. There's some people that come from theater and stage, and so it's a little similar, but the vast majority of people are coming from outside, into VO.
I asked that because I wonder if you would be, well, I know the answer to this, but I wonder if you would be who you are, what you're doing, had the 18-year-old version of you gone into voiceover at that point and tried to make it happen.
Yeah, no. Yeah, not at all.
Do you think you would have given up?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Because I didn't, I was tired. I wanted to do something that I felt good about. And, part of it, I'm undiagnosed, but I'm pretty sure I have ADHD. And looking back, I'm like, oh, yeah. Okay. Like it starts to like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Like never like jumping from job to job, not knowing what, like not feeling really in part of anything. And now I've created my whole thing that fits me, which is completely an ADHD thing. But
well, and that's funny. Yeah. Because your job now allows you to jump from job to job in a productive way, and not a spiraling out of control type way. You've created a life in which you support the way you feel.
Yeah, no, it's a really great point. I didn't think about that, but yeah, how I got to this, to the VO school, like I started taking a class, the owner became fast friends, she was like mentor. And this is where I got my first job on Craigslist. And this was people used to market on Craigslist, and they're like, what would you charge? And I was like, wait, up until then I had an agent, and I was on a casting site, an online casting site, and they tell you what the rate is. And I was like, oh, I don't know. Like, I thought you were supposed to tell me, like, oh, like didn't even think about that. Right. I was like only a year in. And so I asked my friend, like, hey, I text her, and she didn't get back to me. And I think I charged them like $200 or $250, and they paid it. And she's like, oh no, that's okay. I would have charged more, but here's some info. And so it was like a good little analyst. I was like, oh, I'm going to make myself like a rate guide so that I don't have this issue again. Like thinking from the corporate world, like, how do you not know what your price is, right? Like that sounds ridiculous. You know, any business, like if you don't know your costs, you're not in business. Right. And so I was like, wait, yeah, why don't I know my stuff? And I just thought it was different. Like you had an agent, and I was just so ignorant, you know, naive to the industry.
No, I think you were just like everyone else that is in a creative field.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I was just like everybody else, but I was ignorant to like that was the way that it was going. Like I was just like, oh, right. I just thought you got your stuff from the agent, and like where else? Like, oh, I didn't, like now I'm marketing. I don't even think like I'm marketing to people. Like I'm gonna have to tell them what my rate is. And so, you know, I put together, you know, she gave me some rates resources, a few things, surveys and things that people had done. And I found some like rate guides, you know, that were out there, and I put something together for myself, and it was super comprehensive. And I sent it to my mentor, and she was like, she's like, oh my God, like we need this in the industry so bad. I'm like, what do you mean? And she's like, yeah, there's no rates. Like, and just to explain, like we have the union, SAG-AFTRA is also a voiceover union, but they don't really care about voiceover. They care about film and TV. And so they don't really do things for voiceover, but they ignored the internet. Even though, you know, Porky Pig, his name's Bob Bergen, he was like on the board, and he's like, hey, like the internet is here, like you have to adapt. And they're like, I do declare, we all SAG-AFTRA. And they ignored it. And now like 90% of the work is non-union. So because the internet happened. And so they didn't address that. And with that, there's no contracts, there's no rates. Like the union, there's minimums. And if you're a signatory and you do union work, you have to pay it. It's the way it works. Just like if you're a teacher, like the things go through the union, very similar. But not anymore. And so there's very little work. A lot of it's like big stuff and certain things where it's like the A-listers, and the average like union actor like doesn't even make like $8,000 a year or something like that. Definitely doesn't make enough to get health care. So there's like this big gap of like nobody knowing what to charge for things. And so apparently it's just like, oh, we need this. Like nobody knows what to do. It's like the wild, wild west. So she's like, would you work with me on this? And she knew all these coaches and all this stuff because she was a big dog. Like she's on all kinds of Cartoon Network shows now. She's crazy. So she had all these people, and I was like, yeah, sure. So like I just worked with them. We had meetings, we got rates. I put together the thing, we released it and blew it up. And now it's the non-union industry standard for rates in the entire industry, essentially. And so like now I'm like kind of a celebrity in the industry because like I created the rate guide that everybody uses to quote their projects, because nobody knows how to quote things. Like I coach people like every week on rates and negotiation and how to understand their business, because that's the problem is people don't understand their business in voiceover. They're just like what I was doing. So that's kind of how I got to, and then after that, she's like, hey, would you come work with us? And now it's transformed where now I run the company, and that's kind of how I've built that life. You know, there's a lot of good things that happened and luck and just, hey, I just made this sheet that I thought everybody knew. Like, I'm like, oh, people don't know how to quote their projects. Like I thought I was the dummy, you know? And so that it helped create, you know, where I could then work for a voiceover company. They asked me to come work for them, and I like left Publix, and it was like, now I work in the industry and around all these coaches and all this stuff. And so that really transformed the life where I was able to work. And then I had massive imposter syndrome. I mean, like I was like 1 year in,
like
and
every other human.
Yeah. But I was like 1 year in, and I was working for this company, and people thought I was something I wasn't because I worked for GVAA. They thought I was like this big deal. And so, and it was just like like, oh, who me? And over the years of just being involved in that, and just kind of through some other shifts that happened in life, like that we'll get to right now, I just wound up changing my mindset on it, you know, and then just like, nope, we're going to do it. I'm going to be who I am. Like I have this knowledge, like, and I started putting myself out there. And as soon as I did that, like, that's another shit that just like changed the game, where when you believe in yourself and you vocalize that, other people do too. You know, when you're positive, when you're like, yeah, I got this, they're like, yeah, he got it. Like leaders aren't like, hey guys, I think we're going to do it today. You know, they're like, we're going to get out there, we're going to kill it, you know, because they're positive and they're setting the tone. And we have a tendency not to do that for ourselves, you know? And so that was that. But
A friend of mine that I talked to earlier, we were talking about something completely different, but I think it aligns with what you're talking about to move forward. So hers was more grief related, but she termed radical acceptance, and that's of ourselves and of other people. And once we have that of all parties, then we can positively move forward because we understand that we're exactly where we need to be, and what we offer is perfectly fine and good and what we should be offering, and that we move forward with that. So it kind of equated to that, like, is that opened doors for you once you realize, no, I can do this and I have the skills to do this, and let's go. Let's make it happen. But Absolutely. To your point about rates, I think the rate conversation is so true for probably anyone that's trying to do something creative on their own. As you know, myself, I've dabbled in digital art stuff. I've done books. I've done all these things. I've helped other people put together like marketing communication type things. And it's always like, well, what's your rate? And I was like, I don't know. So you're definitely not alone in that. And I wish there was more transparency in rates and salaries and all that just across the world. Like, why is it such a secret?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's some people like, it's the competition thing, or they don't, and that's where it's like this hyper competitive thing. And if we were just like, hey, there's room for everyone to play, like that's kind of the way I look at it. Like, I hate to say this, a middle-aged white dude, the middle-aged, and there's like, there's only so many things that I'm going to be a fit for, like when casting, they want like a 25-year-old black guy, like, that's not me, right? So I can't do that. Like, and that's okay. And it's like being like, there's things for me, and the things that are for me are for me. And that goes, and that's just like, for me, it's casting, and it has to do with like who you are and what you are. And a lot of times, but in the regular world, it's like, this is me and this is what I do. And there is enough room for me, and there's room for other people too. So like when people come in, they're like, oh man, like, oh, I don't know about voiceover. Like, I don't, whatever. It's like, no, there's room for everybody, because it's about who you are. It's not what your voice is, or it's like, so it's you. So there's always room for people in the industry. And if we like, hey, like people, it's like, oh, a competition. It's like, is there not enough business for?
But also, do you want to know that you got the job because you were the cheapest?
Yeah, exactly.
Or because you were the best.
Right. And that's the thing. And it's valuing yourself. And this is what I talk about. It's funny that, well, not funny. I kind of got to it, but I'm going to be speaking at a conference in 3 weeks, and I talk about rates, and a lot of it has to do, I'm also doing mindset and mindfulness, and it has a lot to do with how we view ourselves and our businesses. And a lot of it's like, we're not worthy to get the stuff. It's a lot of people cut corners to book a job to make the money. And then it's like, so how do you feel about that you didn't get the rate that you should have? And they're like, I know I should have got more, but they don't have the gusto to be like, sorry, I can't work for that. This is my rate. Or like, I can work a little bit and negotiate off the rate. And a lot of it is it's like a scarcity mindset. A lot of people they operate in fear and scarcity. And I'm guilty of it too. Everybody is, but they're like, oh no, what if they don't do this? And what if? A lot of what ifs. What ifs are fear, because they haven't happened. You're projecting your fears onto the potential future.
Right. It's an imposter syndrome.
Yeah. And so when you look at it, and it's just like, hey, this is about patience and perseverance. It's not about how much money are you going to make. And a lot of people make it about that. And I understand we need to make money in it, but it's almost like if you don't focus on like booking and making money all the time, and you focus on the craft and being present and doing the work, the money takes care of itself. Things happen. You book like it just happened to me. It's like, man, I didn't book anything in February or January. And then I made the most money I've ever made in a month, in a week, or for a month. I had my biggest month the first week of March, so I'm like, oh man, but then things happen. And so I think it's about just believing in yourself, letting things flow, and just being present, and just focus on the work, because it's all a long game anyway. It's all consistency. you're not going to get to the end. Nothing's going to happen in a week. So if you're just working on the stuff during the day or that day and being present, then, you don't have to put the pressure of constantly succeeding. You're just trying to do your best every day, and you take the pressure off of that, from yourself, I think. And so a lot of people get that where they don't value themselves. They don't know what their worth is, And so then I explain to them, like, no, like in commercials, like people like, oh, I don't know. Like, let me ask you something. When Coca-Cola does a commercial campaign, are they like, I hope we make some money with this ad campaign? No. They fire their ad agency if they don't make money. They are there to make millions upon millions of dollars. And if they're using a commercial and your voice is in that commercial, you're making them money. So you intrinsically have value, and people are like, oh, okay, I get it. And people don't put it into that perspective of like what their value really is to a brand. Just like a lawyer is like, oh, I charge $300 an hour, because they know that their skills are in demand and they have their skills only. But voice actors don't do that. It's like, if it was easy, they wouldn't be hiring us. Why are they going out to the top agents in the country and trying to get the best talent in the country, in the world, to then pay them like shit? What's the point? Like, you want the cream of the crop, but then you don't want to pay for it. Like, so it comes with value. And so once people start really recognizing that what they do has value and they believe in it and not just think it, and like, I've turned down jobs for sure. If you're not ready to turn down jobs, you're not ready to be, you're not there yet. That's where it needs to be, where your value. So I say, like, hey, the electrician comes to a house call and he says, this is going to be $1,500. And you say, I got 200. They laugh and walk out the door. They don't be like, oh no, well, maybe will they hire me? Like, no, because they know what their services cost. They know what their value is because of what they do. They have that intrinsically in trades and things like that, because there's history and it's just kind of passed down. But in voiceover and acting, it's very subjective, and that's not there. And so that's what like the rate guide and this stuff does, is it's bringing, solidifying what people should be able to get to know their value, so that they can have a decent business and not destroy the industry with low rates and, gig work. And, it's a whole other podcast. But so, yeah.
If you could go back to that version of you that had just come back from your honeymoon and lost your job 3 days later, what advice could you tell that person that would help you be even more successful than you are right now?
I think I'd probably tell them, just follow what you want to do. Don't ignore the noise, and don't worry. It's all going to work out. So don't stress about what's happening in between, hindsight's 2020. I mean, so yeah, I think that would be, I would definitely, just chill, relax. It's all going to
chill.
Yeah. It's all going to work out. Because I think when I've let go, like that's one of the biggest, like there's a book called Letting Go that I recommend. It's a heady book, but it was the first book I read after I got divorced, which was the other shift. And that, it's like not holding on to the thing, and so like I got divorced. It was like letting go of not having that, letting go of the thought of not being with that person anymore, or the life that I wasn't going to have, like just letting go of the emotional attachment to those things. And I think when we let go of that and we don't harness on it, we can be a little bit more free and just, I know things are going to work out, and we're not so anxiety driven and trying to control every aspect, so that, especially with anxiety, you try to control every aspect of things so that it's safe. And I think we do that a lot, even if you don't have anxiety, and because we're trying to be safe. And I think if we don't feel like we have to be safe, because risk usually pays off. A lot of times you got to take a risk, and like I got divorced, and 2 years later, I moved out to LA, packed up my car and just drove across country, and said, I'm going to go start a new life. I'm going to go do something new. I'm going to go, I have friends, I have a career that lives in LA. Let's go have fun and see what happens. Like, what if it doesn't work out? I'm like, okay, I'll just move back. Right. I don't know, And so it was like, that was like that that's the shift that got me to believing in myself more, and to taking that transformational step of breaking out of imposter syndrome. And it was a lot of the mental work. I've done a lot of like shadow work and working on who I am, and and those things, and that has all contributed to it. But I really think taking that massive risk and betting on myself, and that's the thing. When you bet on yourself, that's great because it's house money. That's what it is. You're like, I bet on myself to move across the country and make it happen. And I did it because there was no other option. And if it didn't work, then it didn't. And I moved back. But it's all about that first day, instead of being like, well, what if it doesn't work out? I don't give a shit about what ifs. It's like right now I'm there. Right now I live in LA. Right now I'm a working, successful voice actor and coach. Those things could change, but that shift helped me to understand more about me. So I think you asked me in the beginning, are you grateful? Are you grateful for all of those? And absolutely, like, obviously who wants to get divorced? Nobody wants to get divorced. Nobody wants to almost cut their leg off. No one wants to lose their job right after they get married. But those things shaped me to who I am right now. And so if all of those things didn't happen, we wouldn't be talking. I wouldn't be here. None of this stuff would happen. Right. So I think you have to be grateful for everything that does happen in life, because no matter what, if it's good or bad, it teaches you a lesson. And that's, and if there's challenges to overcome, obstacles to overcome along that journey, that just, it makes you a better person. And I would say, like, if you find someone that didn't have any struggles in life, they're probably pretty entitled. Like, if you haven't had any sort of, like, everyone's had struggles in life, right? Like, that's what makes us who we are, is how we overcome the things that happen in life. Not that it happened to us, like, I could have just been like, oh, poor me, and not worked 7 days a week on my therapy, and I would not be able to jump, run, and live a normal life.
Right.
And if I said, like, oh, poor me, my wife left me, and, didn't want to fight for our marriage, and poor me, blah, 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 I would have been depressed. Instead, 2 weeks later, I was like, this sucks, but let's move forward. And of course it was hard, but the mentality was like, hey, okay, if you don't want to be with me, then all right, then I don't need to waste my time with that. And that was the mentality, like, I'm moving forward now. And that taught me to, all those obstacles can change us and form who we are. So you have to be grateful for all the things, good and bad, because they happened, and they shape who you are as a person.
Yeah. So I think that advice can be summed up in 3 words: is trust the process, and trust that your life is going to unfold the way that it is meant to unfold, and trust that is going to involve some tough times and some great times, and all of it will shape you who you are.
Agreed.
So I appreciate you sharing your story. You've had a couple bumps along the way, but I think you're in the right place right now because of all those areas. So thanks again for being on the show.
Appreciate you having me. It's been fun.
You've just listened to the Life Shift podcast. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. For more information about how you can support the Life Shift podcast, please visit www.thelifeshiftpodcast.com. See you next time.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
Hi, I'm Anna Faris, and I have this podcast fittingly titled Anna Faris is Unqualified, where each week a different celebrity and I attempt to give relationship and dating advice. Recent co-hosts have included Matthew McConaughey.
You got somebody you care about, you lost track of them. Go find out.
Margaret Cho.
Vacation sex is always irresistible.
Gwyneth Paltrow.
I could make it all about them and not have to focus on my own problems.
And Seth Rogen. So if you're wondering what your favorite celebrity or I would do in your situation, just listen and subscribe to Anna Faris is Unqualified. Free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.